So you bought your first motorcycle and have been putting in some decent seat time and miles on it. You have the fundamental techniques down of braking and throttle technique. But what's next? Welcome to the next level, you legends. What's going on, y'all? This is SK13. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about my top 5 intermediate rider skills. There are so many different skills that you can work on, but this is my top 5 and is also my opinion. You are welcome to have yours, and I would love to hear what your top 5 list is. So comment down below and let me know. Make sure to stay till the end of the video for a bonus tip that applies to all rider levels, from beginner all the way to advanced, and it's something that really might surprise you, as it's not something that's really talked about for some reason. So yeah. So, who is an intermediate rider? How do you know if you are one yet? It can be difficult to define this. You've put some miles on your first bike for X amount of time, but it's hard to really put a mile or time frame for when you should be an intermediate rider by. Half a year of riding or 1,000 miles of riding can mean very different things to people who ride highway only versus someone who rides in different environments: highway, mountain roads, urban cities, etc., etc. I'd say once you feel overall comfortable on the bike and have the basic braking and throttle control down to the point where you're not really having to focus too much attention to executing those things, go ahead and start adding these tips in. So to start the list off, we have trail braking. This is a technique that people usually deem to be an advanced rider skill, but in my opinion, it should be intermediate. After you learn your beginner rider skills, you'll likely have the itch to try and take turns faster. We can't deny that taking a turn faster or the sense of speed through a turn can be exhilarating, but it can also be dangerous because during a turn, the bike is typically more leaned over. More lean equals more risk. What happens if you need to slow down mid-turn for whatever reason? Sure, you can decrease the lean angle and then progressively add brake pressure. But an even better way is trail braking. Trail braking is a technique where you continue to apply braking force after the initiation point of the turn in to the corner, instead of finishing the entire braking process while the bike is still upright and before you start to turn in. Here's a diagram that helps illustrate it. You can use either front or rear, or both front and rear brakes for trail braking. The idea is to continue using the brakes while leaning into the turn, but as you increase the lean angle of the bike, you gradually reduce braking pressure. You'll ultimately get to the point that the braking pressure trails off into nothing, usually at the point of max lean angle, which is typically at the apex of the turn or whichever corner that you're in. The benefits of doing this is multifactorial. It increases load on the front tire, which can squeeze the tire and increase the contact patch to the ground for added grip when you start leaning in. It reduces the speed, which also decreases the bike's turning radius. And lastly, you're already on the brakes during a turn, which minimizes reaction time. A big drawback of trail braking is when it's done incorrectly. And if the extra load on the front tire is too heavy, you could overload it and cause slippage. It's harder to correct front tire slippage when compared to the rear. This is why some people may tell you they drag the rear brake through the turn as well. Easier to recover from a rear slippage. Now, do you need to use trail braking to be a good rider? No.
Nope.
But in my opinion, the benefits of learning are definitely worth it. Alright, that was a long one. Next on the list is covering the front brake. Anyone take a physics class before? If not, Let me share my experience from my first lab class. My partner would line up a ruler at the edge of the lab desk and then drop it unannounced. You can imagine the anxiety trying to anticipate when my partner would drop it. It was like trying to mind read your significant other about when they'll bring the past into an argument. My job was to catch the ruler as fast as I could after my partner drops it. The partner would flip the ruler so that the zero line or distance is facing towards the floor, so that when I catch the ruler, the distance from 0 to whichever distance I catch it at is my reaction time. The amount of time it takes for one to catch the ruler will be shorter if they already have their hand below the ruler drop point versus if you had your hands by your side or in your pocket. Same concept applies to braking. Your reaction time is faster if your hand is already in close proximity to the brakes. Reaction time won't be any different, but the effect that you're looking for, aka actually starting to brake, will be delayed the physically further you are from the target. In fact, there was even a study titled "The Effects of Distance on Reaction Time in Aiming Movements." If you do care, this was a randomized study that used appropriate statistical analysis to calculate p-values. The study essentially had 3 different experiments. Experiment 1 allowed for pre-cued, quote-unquote pre-cued, movement, meaning it allowed advanced preparation. You can compare this to having your fingers covering the front brake. They found that there was no influence of distance on reaction time, obviously because pre-cued movement was allowed. Experiment 2 removed the pre-cue allowance and found that preparing a movement of increased distance ended up lengthening reaction time. Experiment 3 then explored movements to target of different distances, and participants had to do multiple trials. This experiment found that the reaction time was influenced by distance alone. So, TLDR, covering the front brake reduces activation time or time to action, which improves your safety margin. Now, do you always need to cover the front brake? Nope. But if you're riding aggressively, are in turns and can't see through the corner, are on unfamiliar roads, or are riding through an intersection, I would highly recommend it. Next up, we have finer control of the throttle. So at this point, you can open and close the throttle without looping the bike. Good job. The next step is to practice holding steady throttle with different grip types with your hand. Check out what I'm doing here. So here, I'll go in and pinch the throttle with my index and thumb, then I'll move it over to the side of my palm, and then using my palm and thumb together, so trying to maintain throttle, and I use different angles that way. So that's what I'm talking about, by practicing different grips to maintain that throttle. The goal is to learn how to maintain throttle or keep the bike at a certain RPM range. Now, you're likely asking yourself, what the heck for? The benefits is twofold in my opinion. First, developing finer throttle control improves your overall riding ability because the ultimate goal of any of your riding skills when riding is to develop them to be smooth. Smooth braking, smooth throttle, smooth changes in body positioning, etc. Smooth is not only safe, but also fast. The other benefit is to develop the flexibility of changing your grip on the throttle so it benefits you the most in whichever situation that you're in. For example, your wrist is getting tired when you're on a long highway stretch when commuting. Change your grip so it's more comfortable without jerking the bike and scaring yourself. Another example, which I think is more important, is when you're in a turn and are leaning, especially when you lean towards your throttle hand, so you're going right. You want the ability to change the grip so that you're holding the throttle like a screwdriver. I found that by doing this, I'm able to feel more comfortable and less rigid when leaning right, which means in turns, this helps me have finer control of the throttle during the turn. Finer control of the throttle in a turn is key, as even a slight over-opening of the throttle can cause slippage depending on how leaned over you are. Before we get to the last two tips and then the bonus tip, let me know what you guys think about adding evidence or scientific studies into videos. Is that something you enjoyed, disliked, it flew over your head? Let me know. All right, next tip is keeping your bike in first gear at a stoplight. Why do this? For safety reasons, duh. Pretend you get to a light and then you immediately drop it into neutral and start chilling. You proceed to keep an eye on your surroundings, 360 awareness, just like you were taught in your beginner course or from whomever or wherever you learned it from. You suddenly notice in your rear view mirror that a car is coming in, a little hot, and you think they won't stop in time. Now you have to clutch in, drop it into gear, and then move out of the way before you get absolutely wrecked by a couple tons ramming into your behind.
It was at this moment that he knew.
Jokes aside, there are a couple steps that need to be taken before you can simply move. And in a high stress situation like that, you may freeze up and not think properly as well. So what can you do? Eliminate as many variables as you can by simply keeping the bike in first gear and keeping the clutch in, ready to go at a moment's notice.
But SK, that gets tiring on your clutch hand and my hand starts to tense up over time.
Fair point. And it happens to me too. What I do is I wait for at least one car to pull up behind me, come to a complete stop, and then I'll drop it into neutral and drop the clutch. I'll still keep my eye on my surroundings, including my rear, but I have a cushion on me now, so I feel more comfortable. Sometimes though, if I see a big old truck pulling up behind me, I'll drop it into gear, even if I had the cushion behind me, or keep it in gear if no cushion is there, and just wait for the truck to come to a complete stop. Then I'll go back in neutral. So I tend to be a little bit more defensive with big vehicles because not only is it more rolling mass, but their vision may also be limited and legit might not see you because we're smaller on a motorcycle. Lastly, you want to make sure you show others that you are slowing down. You'll get used to downshifting and using engine braking to slow down. Engine braking feels a lot stronger on a motorcycle, and honestly, the sounds of downshifts and hearing the revs come down each time is intoxicating. But I think beginners can be lulled into slowly relying on it to slow down when casually riding, which is okay, but engine braking is something that only you as the rider are aware of. Others around you, aka cage drivers, cars, if you don't know what that is, have no clue that you're slowing down. And as there's no light for them to know you are, things can happen, right? Things can get dicey. So how do you show others you're slowing down? Easy. Just tap the rear brake. This provides others around you a visual cue that you are slowing down, and in turn tells them to slow down to maintain a safe distance from you. I have seen some brake light mods that flash multiple times when you tap the brake for this purpose. You can get fancy lights at the back of your helmet or even your jacket. I have even seen people buy aftermarket kits for the rear brake to light up when engine braking without applying any brake pressure front or rear. Honestly, I just tap the rear brake and that's been working well for me so far. So pick something according to your preference and comfortability level. Finally, we are at the bonus tip. I mentioned at the beginning that this is something for all riding levels, beginner all the way to advanced. So what is it? It is staying physically fit. Now, before you write this off and dismiss it completely, hear me out. Honestly, this tip itself may deserve its own video. I'll give you guys a brief summary though now. There is one side of the coin that folks likely know about, which is that staying physically fit helps with riding endurance, especially if riding sports bikes. It takes a lot of strength and energy to maintain body positioning without, all those pressure points like on your back, on your wrists, getting tiring. You're using your legs and core to keep yourself up on the bike. Like I said, I think this is generally well known. But what you may not know about is something that I haven't really seen anyone mention before. And that is the reduction in reaction time that is seen by staying physically fit. Don't take my word for it. This study here compared reaction times between visual and auditory stimuli on the basis of gender and level of physical activity. The study found that reaction times, both auditory and visual stimuli, were faster in those that were regularly exercising versus those that had more sedentary lifestyles. Improved reaction time can definitely be life-saving when riding motorcycles. No, you don't need to have Greek god level of physical fitness. The point is to just incorporate exercise into your weekly routines. Are there any tips that we went over today that were new for you? Which one did you think was the most important for you personally? What are some of your tips for riding? Comment down below and share with the community so that we can all learn and grow. Thanks for staying till the end, you legends. As always, thumbs if you enjoyed it, vaporize that sub button if you loved it, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.